He's in there, officer. The sick bastard's in there. That I do think Cyberpunk Edgerunners is overrated. Put your fucking hands up! We're the contrarian cops, and we're here to take you in. The fuck? What did I do? You know exactly what you did, you psycho. We find the defendant.
Wait just a minute, Your Honor. What if my client were to rewatch the series, but this time keeping in mind some of the feedback he got in his last video, and see if his opinion changes?
Yeah, I could do that. Alright. Permission granted, but you're on thin ice. Okay, well, in my last video, I said that I thought Cyberpunk Edgerunners was a bit overrated. It promptly got dislike bombed. And yes, I can tell based on the analytics on who actually watched through the video. But you know what? That's okay. I knew my opinion wasn't very popular, but I got a surprising amount of comments agreeing with me, and even the ones that didn't, a lot of them offered some very interesting criticisms and feedback regarding my thoughts. And, well, that's kind of what I wanted to start. An interesting dialogue on the show. Some of the criticisms that stuck out to me the most were how the fast pace of the show, coupled with the minimal build-up for characters or plot points, was a reflection of not just Night City, but also David's mindset. Another interesting criticism was to see Edgerunners as kind of like a Greek tragedy, with dire consequences as a result of a character flaw. I said in the video that there wasn't a lot of build-up to some important character developments or plot points, but what if, in the grand scheme of things, none of those people or events were truly important? What if the show is really about the unforgiving, cruel nature of Night City? So, because of this half dialogue, half riot around my video, I decided to give the show another watch with the feedback in mind, to see if I was wrong or missed some things the first time. But first, I want to make some things clear since there seemed to be some misconceptions in the first video. I'm confused as to why a number of people thought I was being overtly clickbaity or going against the hype of the show purely for views. In terms of clickbait, the video title was Cyberpunk Edgerunners is overrated, and the thumbnail said not great. In the video, I said I thought Edgerunners was good and that I liked it. I just didn't think it was a masterpiece like the majority does. So I rated the show good, while most rated it a masterpiece. The literal definition of overrated is rated or valued too highly. And in my video, I explained why I thought the show was rated too highly. That does not mean I disliked the show or thought it was bad, which a lot of the comments also claimed, I believe. As for the thumbnail, I don't recall saying the show overall was great. I said aspects of the show, such as the animation and music, were amazing. As an anime overall, I said I thought it was pretty good. So, when did I mislead the viewer? By definition, I didn't, and I even deliberately avoided clickbaity thumbnails, such as saying, "it sucks," or anything ridiculous like that. Some people also said that maybe Edgerunners wasn't my cup of tea, but I'm a huge fan of both the cyberpunk genre and anime. I mean, the Blade Runner films are in my top 10 movies of all time. Akira is my favorite anime film of all time, and Psycho Pass is one of my favorite anime series of all time. Finally, there seemed to be a lot of people who think I made the video or said what I said just to piss off an audience and get views. There were people even calling me an oddball just for having some criticisms on the show and saying I only crawled out of a grave to shit on Edgerunner. But for me, that doesn't make sense. If you see a whole bunch of people having a lot of fun, you're gonna want to join in on the laughs. And if I'm a contrarian, why did I praise Mob Psycho 100 and One Punch Man in the same video? Both of which are anime that are even more popular, with huge fan bases and arguably more hype than Edgerunners. Wouldn't I be hating on them too? Also, videos that praise the show get much more views and likes than criticizing it. So if I was clout chasing, the choice would have been a no-brainer. At the end of the day, I was just expressing my opinions despite them being unpopular, and I didn't expect people to just instantly agree with them either. But what about my opinion? Has my opinion changed? After rewatching Edgerunners, here's what I thought I got wrong or overlooked the first time. For one, Rebecca is characterized and fleshed out more than I had thought. She was already my favorite from the show, but there were definitely hints of what she was going through. For example, after her brother's death, she's gone for 2 episodes and appears after a time skip of a couple months. She also has augmentations that were similar to her brother, and later on expresses her concern for David and draws parallels to him and her brother. Originally, I thought I might have been reaching and making that connection about her being absent for the time skip, but after really looking at all the different factors and things she does, I don't think it's a stretch anymore. I think it's fair to say that those were definitely hints or implications as to how she was dealing with the loss. There were also a lot of good instances of show don't tell that I feel like I missed the first time I watched it, with some of them kind of being quick shots with implications due to the fast pace. Examples of this are the little hints given on character motivation, such as Kiwi being alone while everyone is hanging out, possibly cluing you in on her distrustful nature as she believes everyone will eventually backstab each other. You also see how David's mom dying impacts him and his decisions. He has quick flashbacks of her in a car chase, he'll frequently glance to her ashes, and her presence is definitely felt in the last episode. The mom's dialogue in the beginning also feels more impactful in the dub, I felt. Originally, I kind of criticized the dialogue the mom had with David in the car. I said it felt a bit clunky and inorganic, but I got a couple comments saying that, like, you know, a lot of Hispanic moms really do rant to their child like that. I do think that this is communicated better in the dub because I think they actually have like a Hispanic voice actor. You don't get quite the same feeling in the sub, but regardless, it's not the biggest complaint I had in the show, and I do feel that, you know, if you watch the dub version, it is alleviated a bit. Cyberpsychosis is also hinted throughout the show as being abrupt and possibly coming at the most unexpected moment, and I think Main's abrupt death is kind of a confirmation of this. Finally, the fast pace alleviates some of the complaints I had. There's definitely many intentional choices on how to keep the story moving forward, kind of like how David keeps marching forward his own fate due to his inability to let go of the past or certain deaths. When you watch the show as if it's a quick glimpse into Night City and look at how these mercenaries who think they're all special and important are really just coming and going in a very cyclical nature, it benefits Edgerunners a lot. So with all that being said, how do I feel about the show now? Well, I definitely think some of the criticisms, or at least the severity of them, are diminished when watching the show as a quick look into the harshness of Night City. One of the criticisms I had was a lack of build-up to character developments or plot points. Edgerunner's approach is like a fast-paced dash towards death, and it does a good job at being pretty economical and efficient with only 10 episodes. It doesn't waste time with boring exposition and a lackluster attempt to build up characters or story climax. Instead, it shows you things, if only for a moment, and leaves you with implications, some of which are confirmed by the story. However, I still feel like Edgerunners was not able to show enough due to the 10 episode limit, considering how many different characters and plot points were in the show. And yes, 10 episodes is a very short amount, but I feel like if they just pace things slightly differently or show just a bit more for certain characters, it would have made Edgerunners even better. In my opinion, the characters and emotional climaxes throughout the show could still have been made better if more about them were shown. Well, what if the fast pace and casual attitude towards death is supposed to put us in David's headspace and how people feel when inside Night City? Shit happens, people die, move on. But throughout the show, David is clearly emotional about the deaths of his fellow crewmates. He's shocked when Pilar gets zeroed, angry when Rebecca dies, deeply traumatized by Main's death, and when Kiwi dies, he doesn't really seem to care that much when Kiwi dies. But the point is, David is attached to these people, at least to some degree. So if David is one of the main characters, I think the viewer knowing more about the crew and being attached to them will help us feel what his character is feeling when he sees his friends die. For example, I thought it was mainly the presentation and execution of Main's death that made it amazing and emotional, as opposed to my actual attachment to Main as a character. I mean, up until his death, we don't really know too much about Main. We know enough about him to understand and like him. You know, he's a likable boss, a great wingman, and a good friend. But we're not shown enough or told enough about him to really say he's a fully fleshed out character that we love. And you can say the same about a number of other characters too, such as Kiwi, Dorio, and Pilar. You see them enough and know enough about them to like them, but not necessarily enough that they're extremely compelling characters by their lonesome. And I'm not saying every character needs more shown about them, especially if Edgerunners is only 10 episodes. You'll have to pick and choose. Pylar's death can still serve as shock value and a wake-up call that death is casual in Night City. But what about Maynard Kiwi, the boss whose death traumatizes David and makes him spiral to cyberpsychosis, and the traitor who begins the crew's downfall? I really do believe that they could have been made more compelling if more about them was shown to the viewer. But what if the point is to not care or be attached to these characters?
Don't care, still don't care.
What if their deaths are just supposed to be seen as a dry fact of life in Night City, and the viewer is supposed to be jaded like its inhabitants, or with little time to process things? Well, I definitely think the show is trying to depict how death awaits almost every mercenary in the end, and presents that as a fact of life in the city. I mean, just look at how many of the crew end up dying. However, it's clear that the show is still very character driven, focusing on the actions and fates of key figures. And when characters die, the show is obviously trying to make you feel emotional over them as opposed to being jaded. When Maine dies, you're in awe, and when Rebecca dies, you're in shock. So yes, I think there is a deliberate attempt here to speedrun past deaths to emulate the feeling of how casual death is in Night City. But since Edgerunners is also still trying to elicit strong emotional responses, I feel the show shoots itself in the foot a little in terms of lasting emotional impact. You're not given a lot of reasons to be completely distraught at certain character deaths, as the show hasn't gotten you attached to them at that level. You're also not given enough reasons to feel completely jaded at their deaths, as the show is very character driven, and one of the main characters is attached and emotional over their death. Anyways, the real question is, do I consider the show a masterpiece? In the first video, I said I thought Edgerunners was good, whereas most seem to see it as a masterpiece and why I considered it overrated. Well, after a rewatch, I think Edgerunners is really good, better than my first watch for sure. I also do think it is anime of the year as of now, but a masterpiece? I'm still not sure I'm convinced.
Explain yourself.
I think most people see the show as a 9 out of 10 or even 10 out of 10, whereas I now think it's more like an 8 out of 10. It's really not that big of a difference, but enough to be a difference between good and masterpiece for me, and enough to piss people off it seems. Also, Mob Psycho 100 Season 3 just started airing, and Chainsaw Man is gonna start airing later this month. Once those series are done airing, I do think they're gonna be the top 2 contenders for anime of the year. Also, when I think of anime masterpieces, I think of Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, Cowboy Bebop, Hunter x Hunter, and other anime that are either perfect in nearly every aspect, revolutionized the industry, are highly influential, stood the test of time, or even all of the above. And even within the cyberpunk genre, you have masterpieces such as Akira and Ghost in the Shell. Edgerunners is for sure good. I'm just not sure that it's on the same level as these anime. So, was I wrong? Was my argument of Cyberpunk Edgerunners being overrated incorrect? Well, I do think I was wrong about some of my criticisms in the first video, or that they were reduced after a second watch, such as my issue with less character development for some crew members, or the role of David's mom in the story. However, I still have some major gripes with Edgerunners, such as not quite showing enough to build enough attachment for key character moments or plot points. Last but not least, contrary to popular belief, I'm not using the show just to milk views, so this will be my last video on Edgerunners unless there's a season 2 or something. And again, just to clarify, I like the show. I recommend it to any sci-fi anime fan, so it's not like I'm dissing the show just to hate on it. And regardless, at the end of the day, this is just my opinion. Before you smash the dislike button, don't you think the world would be boring if everyone just agreed on everything instead of sparking discussions like this? I know you like the show, and I like it too. I just happen to like it a bit less than you do. I know I'm in the minority here, and most disagree, but that's okay. All I'm asking for is to hear me out on why I happen to not love the show on quite the same level. So how about it, Judge? Will you give me another chance? Guilty. Also, am I the only one that thinks Rebecca's neck tattoo looks like the Discord logo? Just me? Alright.